Goblin launch detected.
Before we get into today's game, I want to talk about the sponsors for my channel. Card Conduit is the best way to sell your unused Magic cards. Whether you've got a box of unsorted bulk, or a complete and alphabetized set, there's a great option for everyone. With a payout averaging 19% better than using any one buy list, and that's after fees are applied, you can rest assured you'll get the best bang for your buck. If you're a skeptic like me, their easy customer service and detailed reports make the whole interaction transparent and safe. And if you use the affiliate link in the description below, or the promo code MTGMUDSTA, you'll save 10% off their fees. And 401 Games, Canada's one-stop shop for trading cards, board games, and hobby supplies. Not to mention an easy to use and great online buy list. And if you use the promo code MTGMUDSTA, your first purchase of MTG sealed and singles will be 5% off. And Dragon Shield, the strongest sleeves for your strongest deck. So be sure to use the code MUDSTA or the affiliate link down below to save 5% on your next order. I'd also love to bring your attention to the Richard Kane Ferguson Kickstarter campaign going on right now. Richard Kane Ferguson is one of Magic's most iconic and recognizable artists, and this is his very first Kickstarter campaign. With some of Magic's most iconic cards like Force of Will and the Tutors, Enlightened, Mystical, Vampiric, and Worldly, you're sure to find something you'll love. Early backers also get to vote on what other arts to unlock to become playmats down the road, so be sure to back early and use my affiliate link down below to let them know that I sent you. Hey gang, and welcome back. Today's patron shoutout goes to Wes Allen. Thanks Wes for supporting the channel. In today's game, Maximus, Fred, Mika, and Ian are playing, and I'm sitting this one out and controlling the life totals. In today's game, Maximus is playing his newly made Mazzy deck, keeping Jungle Shrine, Temple of Abandon, Plains, Eldrazi Conscription, Vengeful Ancestor, Mesa Enchantress, and Argothian Enchantress. Fred is playing his Chainer deck, keeping Ancient Tomb, 2 Swamps, Yawgmoth Thran Physician, Soul Ring, Shadow Spear, and Bolas' Citadel. Mika is playing his Captain Ingathrod, keeping Island, Consuming Aberration, everyone's favorite Mesmeric Orb, Watery Grave, Notion Thief, Exotic Orchard, and Path of Ancestry. Ian is playing Alela, keeping 3 Swamps, Path of Ancestry, Hullbreaker Horror, Reality Shift, and Felwar Stone. Max wins a die roll and starts us off. He draws and plays a Temple of Abandon, scrying 1, and then passes. Fred plays a Swamp for turn and freaks the table out as he taps it, but ultimately just casts Shadow Spear. Mika draws and plays a tap Path of Ancestry. Ian likes that so much he does the same, drawing and playing his own Path of Ancestry and then passing to Max. Max draws and plays a tap Jungle Shrine. Fred's got an Ancient Tomb for turn and just passes after that. Mika's got an Island for turn and he pays 2 for Mesmeric Orb and then passes after that. Ian untaps 1 and has to mill a card from the Mesmeric Orb and he draws for turn. He then plays a Swamp and casts Felwar Stone and passes. Max also mills some cards, and he then draws for turn and plays a Plains. He casts Mesa Enchantress and passes to Fred. Fred draws and plays a Swamp. Fred then taps the Ancient Tomb, taking 2, and casts Soul Ring. He then taps the Soul Ring and his Swamps to cast Yawgmoth and passes to Mika. Mika mills 2, draws for turn, and then plays a tap Watery Grave. He passes after that. Ian mills the appropriate amount of cards, draws for turn, and plays a Swamp. He then casts his commander, Alela, and then passes to Max. Maximus mills, draws for turn, and plays a Plains. He then casts Redemption Arc and targets Yawgmoth, drawing a card from the Mesa Enchantress, and then passing. Fred mills his cards, draws, and plays a Malakir Mire. He then plays Kakusho, and immediately sacrifices it to Yawgmoth, giving Alela a -1/-1 counter and drawing a card. Each of his opponents also get drained for 5, and Fred gains 15 life. Moving to combat, Fred then swings Yawgmoth at Mika since it's goated, and Mika just takes a 2. With nothing else, Fred passes. Mika mills, draws for turn, and plays an Exotic Orchard. Ian mills his cards, draws, and plays a Swamp. He casts an Archmage of Echoes, and then goes to combat. He swings Alela at Fred, and after it connects, goads Yawgmoth, and this means that it can only attack Mika. With nothing else, Ian passes. Maximus mills his cards, draws for turn, and plays a Kessig Wolfrun. He then plays an Argothian Enchantress, and then Enchantress's Presence. But responding to the draw triggers, Mika flashes in Notion Thief and steals Max's 2 draws. With nothing else, Max passes turn. Fred mills his cards, draws, and plays a Cabal Coffers. He then takes another 2 by tapping the Ancient Tomb to help cast Bolus's Citadel. He then casts Whip of Erebos off the top, losing 4. He then casts Cryptghast off the top and loses another 4. He then casts Phyrexian Arena, losing 3. Fred then continues, casting Razaketh off the top and losing even more life, and then sacrifices the Cryptghast to Yawgmoth to take out the Notion Thief, but unfortunately Mika gets to steal the draw. Going to combat, Fred is forced to swing Yawgmoth at Mika, who takes the 2, and Fred gains 2, and with nothing else, Fred passes. Mika mills his cards, draws for turn, and plays a Ruin Crab. He plays a Swamp, which has each opponent getting milled for 3. He then plays a Woe Strider, and gets to scry 1 because he used Path of Ancestry, and both his commander and the Strider are horrors. Once he's done scrying, Mika passes. Ian mills his cards, draws, and in his main phase casts Bitter Blossom. He gets to copy it off the Archmage of Echoes, and he then goes to combat. He swings Alela at Mika, and after connecting, goads the Woe Strider. He then passes to Max after that. Max continues to mill, draws his card, and then plays a Sterling Grove. He draws 3 cards off the cast because of his Enchantresses, and then plays a Sol Ring. He then plays a Jukai Naturalist, drawing 3 more, but despite having drawn 7, can't find a land, and has to pass. Fred mills his cards for turn, and then loses 1 drawing from the arena, and then draws for turn. He plays a Swamp, and he then casts Liliana, Death's Majesty off the top of his library, losing life instead of paying mana. He then downticks her, and returns Cryptghast. He announces he'll move to combat, and Ian casts a Reality Shift and targets Cryptghast. Fred floats mana in response, and then sacrifices the Cryptghast to Yawgmoth, and puts a -1/-1 counter on the Mesa Enchantress, and draws a card. As there's a new round of priority, Fred then uses the mana floating to cast Chainer, taking 2 from the Ancient Tomb to help pay for it. He then uses Chainer to return Kakusho to the field, and once he's out, sacrifices it to Yawgmoth, who targets the Mesa Enchantress again, and drains his opponents for 5 and gains 15, and the Enchantress gets taken out. Fred then decides to keep going, casting a Wormcoil Engine off the top, losing 6, and then a Black Market Connections, losing 3, and then a Grim Haruspex, losing 3 more. Fred then casts Mind Stone off the top, losing 2, and he sacrifices his Wormcoil Engine to Yawgmoth to draw a card, and gets to draw a card from the Haruspex and Yawgmoth, and he puts the -1/-1 counter onto Alela. Moving to combat, Fred swings Razaketh at Max and Yawgmoth at Mika. Mika blocks Yawgmoth with his goat, but sacrifices it before damage to deny the lifelink. Max still takes the 8 to the face though, and Fred gains 8, and with nothing else, Fred passes. Mika mills, then draws her turn and plays an Nephalia Drownyard. This has each opponent milling 3 from the Rune Crab trigger, and Fred responds by casting Stinging Seti off the top with Bolus's Citadel, losing a total of 10 life and drawing 5 cards. They then all mill their cards, and Mika follows up by casting No Mercy. He then goes to combat, and swings the Woe Strider at Fred since it's goated. As they move to blocks, Fred trades the lifelink Worm token, gaining 3 life. Mika then passes after that. Ian untaps, mills the appropriate amount of cards, and then makes 2 fairy tokens and loses 2 life in his upkeep, and he then draws for turn. He decides to hold up his mana and just pass to Max after that. Maximus mills, draws, and then plays Bothersome Quasit. He follows it up with an Enchanter's Bane, drawing 3, goads Razaketh. Max then follows up with a Command Tower and casts Danitha Capuchin. He then casts Shiny Impetus and targets the Archmage of Echoes. Max also goads Chainer with the Quasit, and he then goes to his end step. He targets No Mercy with the Enchanter's Bane, and Mika decides to take the 4. Ian also decides to get in on this end step action, casting Drown in the Loch and targeting Chainer. In response, Fred sacrifices his commander to Razaketh, losing 2, and goes to tutor for a card. Fred mills his card, draws a card from Arena and loses 1, draws for turn, and then makes a treasure token from the Black Market Connections, losing more life. He then plays a Swamp for turn and casts a Yara, which as she comes in, drains each of his opponents for 1. Fred then continues with a Grey Merchant, and his Devotion to Black is 21, which takes out Max and Mika outright. Fred then tries to take out Ian by going for the flashy kill, sacrificing enough permanence to use Bolas' Citadel's other ability. With the ability on the stack and all the creatures having hit the graveyard, Ian responds by casting a thrilling Encore. This has Ian making a fairy token from Alela, and then gets back all the creatures sacrificed, including Grey Merchant and Ayara, which saves him from dying to the 10 damage. Fred gets drained a little bit, and after that happens, Fred then plays a Toxic Deluge, wiping the board, and then passing to Ian. Ian's upkeep has him losing 2, and making 2 fairy tokens to Bitter Blossom. He then plays a Mind Stone for turn, and then Skull Clamp. He then pays to equip the clamp onto the fairy token, drawing 2, and passing. Fred's turn has him drawing and playing a Swamp. He then recasts Chainer using the Cabal Coffers and Ancient Tomb, taking 2 from it, and he then follows up with Ashnod's Altar. Fred then uses Chainer's ability to reanimate Kakusho, and sacrifices it to Ashnod's Altar, draining Ian for the last 5 points of life he has, and wins the game.
Game review time. This game was 54 minutes and 58 seconds. When Fred said he was going to bring out his Chainer deck, I was not expecting the mono black one. Typically I now see the Rakdos version, since a lot of people like that he's able to reanimate and give stuff haste as it comes back in. I will say though, that this Chainer game was crazy, and once again it just showcases how powerful Bolas' Citadel is. And the Citadel led to one of the best plays of the game, I think, which was Ian using Thrilling Encore to bring back all of the creatures that Fred had sacrificed to the Bolas' Citadel to try and kill him. This allowed Ian to save himself with Ayara and the Grey Merchant, and it was really spicy. Maximus's Mazzy deck is more of a go to everyone else and make them attack his opponents kind of deck, with an Enchantress package mixed into it. The day we filmed this was the first time that he'd been playing with it, so he's still working out some of the kinks. Mesmeric Orb paints a giant target on your back, and no one likes to mill their cards, which is unfortunate for Mika. His whole deck revolves around this and stealing value, but when you have 3 opponents ganging up on you, and not very much action going on, it can be hard to forward your game plan.
This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, but it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.